It's terrible that after 50 years, it is behind closed doors.
The moment Princess Anne stepped into the royal vault, the old silence of the monarchy broke in a way no one expected. This was not a routine retrieval, not a quiet family arrangement, and not another hidden adjustment behind palace walls. It was a direct blow to Camilla's place inside the royal circle, because Elizabeth's sapphire necklace was reclaimed by Anne, while Camilla was denied access to the vault entirely. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne did not rush. She knew the weight of every step, because the royal vault, the secure palace storage where historic jewels and family treasures are protected, was never only about diamonds, sapphires, or gold. It was the guarded heart of inheritance. Inside that quiet system, jewels carried memory, rank, and legitimacy. Elizabeth's sapphire necklace, a piece linked to the late Queen's restraint and lifelong devotion to duty, had become more than an ornament. It had become a test. And on that day, Anne passed through the threshold with permission, while Camilla arrived, expecting the same respect, and found the door closed against her. Camilla stopped when the vault officer raised his hand. The Queen Consort's expression changed before a word was spoken, because she understood humiliation faster than any explanation could soften it. The officer told her calmly that her access had been withdrawn, and she asked him to repeat it, as if the second answer might be different. It was not. At that same moment, Anne stood inside as the sapphire case was placed before her, and the Princess Royal's face hardened with controlled emotion. She was not celebrating. She was absorbing the truth that her mother's necklace had now become the center of a family fracture. The closed door changed everything. Camilla had not been delayed by mistake, and Anne had not been invited by accident. The access list had been changed before the Queen Consort arrived, and someone had made sure the timing would leave no confusion. Elizabeth's necklace was leaving the vault under Anne's authority, while Camilla was being denied even the chance to stand before it. That contrast cut deep. It turned a private jewel into a public wound, waiting to open. Anne carried the case with the kind of silence that felt louder than anger, while Camilla remained outside, with pride burning behind her stillness. But before anyone could understand why Anne walked out with the necklace, they had to understand what that jewel meant to every person standing in its shadow. Elizabeth's sapphire necklace was never just a string of stones. It carried the weight of reign, sacrifice, and a woman who spent decades choosing duty over desire. To Anne, it was her mother's discipline made visible. To Camilla, it was a sign of royal acceptance she believed she had earned. And to Charles, it became the one object capable of exposing every fracture he had tried to hide. Anne stood with the sapphire case before her and felt the past return with brutal force. The Princess Royal had known Elizabeth not only as the Queen, but as a mother who believed monarchy meant service before comfort. The monarchy, in plain terms, is the royal system built around the crown, duty, and public trust, and Anne had learned that system through discipline, silence, and sacrifice. The necklace mattered because it carried that lesson. It was not made powerful by sapphires alone. It was powerful because Elizabeth had worn it with restraint, and Anne knew restraint had been her mother's language. Camilla sat in another room, furious and wounded. The Queen Consort kept asking the same question in different ways. Why had a family jewel suddenly become a wall against her? She believed the necklace would have shown that she belonged fully inside Elizabeth's legacy, not as an outsider still waiting for acceptance. That was why the denial cut so deeply. It was not just about access. It was about being told, without a speech, that some parts of the late monarch's memory were still beyond her reach. Charles felt the fracture closing around him. The king understood Camilla's humiliation, but he also understood Anne's fierce protection of their mother's name. He had spent years trying to hold love and duty in the same hand, yet the sapphire necklace made that impossible. William heard about the changed vault list with quiet concern, and the prince immediately saw the danger. A private decision had been made with public consequences, and no one had explained why the door closed when it did. Anne looked again at the case and remembered Elizabeth's warning about royal symbols. The monarch had once told her that some jewels should never become prizes for position. Camilla wanted belonging, Charles wanted peace, William wanted clarity, but Anne wanted protection. And that buried incident led back to one evening when a single remark from Camilla turned a private discomfort into a royal breaking point. Long before the vault door closed on Camilla, one dinner at Balmoral had sealed her fate. It began as a family gathering, calm on the surface and heavy underneath. Yet by the time the plates were cleared, Anne had seen enough, Charles had heard enough, and Elizabeth's sapphire necklace had quietly become the center of a conflict no one dared name aloud. Camilla made the remark softly, but it struck the room like a warning bell. Months before Anne reclaimed the necklace, the Queen Consort asked whether Elizabeth's sapphire necklace should be reassigned for the new reign. Balmoral, the Scottish royal estate long used as a private family retreat, had always been a place where royal wounds surfaced behind closed doors. That night mattered, because the family was not discussing a normal jewel. They were touching something tied to the late Queen's discipline, her authority, and the memory of a reign built on restraint. Anne froze first. The Princess Royal lowered her eyes, then carefully set down her glass, as if one wrong movement could break what little peace remained. Camilla watched her closely, already sensing resistance, but she did not withdraw the question. Charles tried to soften the moment, saying the family could discuss such matters later, yet the king's hesitation only made Anne's anger colder. To her, the delay sounded like permission. To Camilla, it sounded like fear. And between them, Elizabeth's name became the line no one could cross without paying a price. Anne answered with icy restraint. She said some pieces were not reassigned because they were never simply available. The word cut through the room. Charles looked toward his sister, and the monarch knew she was not speaking only as a daughter. She was speaking as someone who had carried Elizabeth's warnings in silence for years. In a documented private account later kept among family papers, Anne recorded that the Queen had once told her certain jewels should only be worn by those who understood the burden behind them. That sentence changed everything. Camilla did not forget the pause that followed. The Queen Consort felt judged, and Anne felt confirmed in her worst fear, that her mother's memory was being treated like a wardrobe choice for a new era. After the dinner, the Princess Royal privately requested a review of the vault access list and the sapphire necklace's custodial status. Custodial status simply meant who had the right to protect, approve, and control use of a royal item. That request became the trigger. The dinner had been the spark, but the explosion came when Camilla finally faced Anne and demanded an answer. When Camilla entered the private room, she was no longer pretending this was about procedure. Her pride had been bruised in front of guards, aides, and the invisible machinery of the crown. Anne was waiting without apology. Between them stood the sapphire necklace, sealed inside its case, and for the first time the conflict was not hidden behind protocol. It had a voice. Camilla closed the door herself. The Queen Consort did not sit, because sitting would have made the moment look calm, and nothing inside her felt calm. Stayed near the sapphire case, steady and unreadable. Protocol, in simple terms, means the official rules and customs that guide royal behavior. But this meeting had moved beyond rules. This mattered because Camilla had been denied access, not in rumor, not in private gossip, but through the palace's own system. It also mattered because Anne had walked out with the one jewel Camilla believed would prove her place inside Elizabeth's legacy. Camilla demanded to know who gave Anne the right to remove the necklace and shut her out of the vault. The Queen Consort's voice sharpened as she said she had stood beside Charles through storms no one else had carried. Anne did not flinch. The Princess Royal answered with quiet force, saying the necklace belonged first to Elizabeth's memory before it belonged to any royal wardrobe. That sentence wounded Camilla more than shouting would have, because it made her desire for acceptance sound like ambition. Anne felt the pain beneath her own anger. She was not defending sapphires, she was defending a mother who could no longer step into the room and say no. Camilla saw that pain, and struck where it hurt, accusing Anne of never accepting her place beside Charles. The words landed hard. For a moment, the Princess Royal's composure almost cracked. but she held herself still and said acceptance could not be forced through jewels. Charles had made Camilla queen consort, but Elizabeth's private symbols still carried a separate weight. Camilla reached toward the table, then stopped before touching the case. Anne opened a folder and placed the written authorization between them. The document confirmed temporary custodianship, meaning Anne had official control over the necklace until the family settled who could approve its use. Camilla read the page once, then again, and the fury in her face turned into something colder. This was not Anne acting alone. Someone had protected her decision in writing. Because Anne may have carried the necklace out, but someone else had made sure she had the authority to do it. The palace wanted the matter contained, but one signature made containment impossible. It was not loud. It was not public. It was not wrapped in ceremony. Yet the document authorizing Anne's custodianship carried enough force to reorder the room around Camilla. In that moment, power did not need a speech. It needed ink, silence, and a name placed where no one expected it. Charles read the authorization file alone, and the silence around him felt heavier with every line. The temporary custodial order placed Anne in direct control of Elizabeth's sapphire necklace, giving the Princess Royal the right to protect it, approve its use, and keep it from public display. A custodial order, in plain terms, is a written instruction that decides who holds responsibility for an important royal item. This mattered because the necklace was not being hidden from the world. It was being protected from misuse inside the family itself. Charles set the file down without speaking. The king understood exactly what the order meant for Camilla, and he knew reversing it would spare the queen consort immediate humiliation. But he also knew Anne had not acted from spite. She had acted from memory. The vault access rules were part of internal family governance, meaning private royal decisions about who may enter, use, or handle historic possessions. Those rules made the choice both intimate and powerful, because the denial came not from the public, but from within the crown's own walls. William entered carefully. The prince chose his words like each one could open another wound. He told Charles that Elizabeth's necklace had become a symbol, and symbols could not be handled like wardrobe pieces for a banquet. The future king understood Camilla would be hurt, but he also understood why Anne believed their grandmother's legacy needed protection. Charles listened, torn between his wife's pain and his mother's shadow, and the monarch's face showed the burden of a decision he could no longer pretend was neutral. The truth landed with quiet force. The access change had been designed to stop Elizabeth's sapphire necklace from appearing at an upcoming state banquet, where Camilla had expected to wear it. That was why the timing had been so precise. Anne's custodianship was not only about storage, it was about stopping a public image before it could be created. Charles allowed the order to stand, and in doing so, he chose silence over reversal. And when the banquet preparations began, the private punishment finally touched the public face of the monarchy. Camilla had endured whispers before, but this was different. This time, the rejection had a shape. A missing necklace, a closed vault, a revised access list, a banquet wardrobe suddenly stripped of the one jewel she had expected to wear. Behind the palace calm, she sat with the knowledge that a piece of Elizabeth's legacy had been placed beyond her reach by her own family. Camilla sat alone after the wardrobe briefing, and the silence around her felt almost cruel. The queen consort removed her gloves slowly, one finger at a time, as if delaying the moment would somehow change what she had been told. Her planned appearance with Elizabeth's sapphire necklace had been cancelled. The state banquet, a formal royal dinner held for important guests and diplomatic honor, was meant to show unity, confidence, and control. Now it had become a quiet punishment. The palace had to adjust the banquet protocol, meaning the order of dress, jewels, arrivals, and ceremonial details, without admitting the deeper family conflict behind it. Camilla understood the insult clearly. She was not being told to choose another necklace because of style. She was being told that Elizabeth's sapphire necklace was no longer hers to request. That mattered, because royal jewels do not simply decorate a person. They announce acceptance, rank, and trust. The queen consort had wanted that trust made visible in front of the world. Instead, Anne's decision had removed it before the public could ever see it, and that success for the Princess Royal became suffering for Camilla. Charles entered and stopped when he saw her face. The king had expected anger, perhaps accusation, perhaps the sharp force he knew so well. But Camilla looked wounded, and that made his silence harder to defend. She asked him whether he had allowed Anne's order to stand because he believed his sister was right, or because he had lacked the courage to stop her. The question did not rise in volume. It did not need to. It struck him because both answers carried guilt. Charles did not answer quickly. The monarch looked away for 1 second too long, and Camilla understood the pause before he shaped a single word. That pause became its own confession. He loved his wife, but he still carried his mother's shadow. He wanted peace, but he had allowed punishment. Camilla's eyes hardened again, not with fury this time, but with the pain of someone who had finally seen where the line was drawn. But the true turning point did not come from protocol or jewels. It came from a brother and sister facing the grief they had both avoided. Away from the guards, the vault, and the sharp machinery of palace authority, Charles and Anne finally met as something simpler and far more wounded: Elizabeth's children. For once, there was no performance of strength, no advisors, no careful royal phrasing, only a brother who had allowed the decision to stand, and a sister who had carried it out because grief had hardened into duty. Charles looked at the sapphire case resting on the table between them, and for the first time, the king seemed less like a monarch than a son. Anne watched him closely, but the Princess Royal did not speak first. The case mattered because it held more than a necklace. It held the memory of a mother who had turned pain into service for 70 years. It also mattered because Camilla's exclusion had become personal, and Charles knew his silence had wounded his wife while protecting Elizabeth's legacy. Charles admitted that seeing the necklace removed had reopened memories he had tried to keep ceremonial. Ceremonial, in simple terms, means connected to official royal duties and public rituals. But this grief was not official, it was private. He remembered Elizabeth wearing sapphires with calm strength, and he confessed that he had treated those memories like part of the crown, not part of his heart. Anne softened when she heard that. She did not forgive everything, but the sharpness in her face eased because Charles had finally spoken as her brother, not only as the king. Anne told him the necklace had to be protected from becoming a symbol of convenience. The Princess Royal said Camilla's pain was real, but Elizabeth's memory could not be used to heal every wound inside the family. Charles looked down, torn between the woman he loved and the mother he still grieved. The monarch knew Camilla wanted belonging, but he also knew Anne was right about one thing: some symbols carried a burden no title could automatically claim. Anne made her final position clear. She did not want permanent triumph, and she did not want Camilla humiliated forever. She wanted written rules for jewels tied personally to Elizabeth, so no one could reach for them out of pride, pressure, or political need. Charles agreed the necklace would not be worn until a family custodial framework was settled. A custodial framework simply meant a clear written plan deciding who could protect and approve certain royal treasures. The decision brought quiet relief, but it also carried danger. By morning, the palace could no longer contain the meaning of the sapphire necklace because the world had already chosen what it believed the denial meant. The story broke not as a palace note, but as a national judgment. By sunrise, the sapphire necklace was no longer locked in a vault. It was everywhere. In headlines, on broadcasts, in conversations outside royal gates. What had begun as a private act of protection became a public symbol of exclusion, and Camilla's denied access suddenly looked like the monarchy speaking without saying a word. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace before the palace had shaped a single reply. Buckingham Palace, the central working home of the monarch, often becomes the place where private royal storms turn into public feeling. That mattered because this was no longer only about Anne, Camilla, or one necklace. It had become a question of who had the right to stand inside Elizabeth's memory. Some people defended the Princess Royal as loyal to her mother. Others called the denial cruel, saying the queen consort had been publicly wounded by a decision made behind closed doors. A London newspaper front page turned the wound into a verdict. The close image of Elizabeth's sapphire necklace sat above the headline, "Anne takes the sapphires. Camilla locked out." Camilla watched the coverage in silence, and the Queen Consort's expression tightened each time the words "locked out" repeated across the screen. She did not argue. She did not call for anyone. The pain had moved beyond anger, because now the nation was speaking the humiliation back to her. Anne heard the headline from an aide and did not smile. The Princess Royal understood public approval could be dangerous when grief was involved. She had reclaimed the necklace to protect Elizabeth's legacy, not to turn Camilla into a spectacle. But the country had chosen its own meaning. A broadcaster framed the story as not a jewel dispute, but a battle over who gets to inherit memory. That sentence cut through the palace because it was simple, sharp, and impossible to dismiss. William privately believed the reaction proved the family could no longer treat symbols as harmless decoration. The prince saw how quickly one jewel had exposed hidden loyalties, old wounds, and the cost of silence. Charles saw it too, and the king understood that every hour without a final decision made the spectacle larger. Camilla had become the face of exclusion. Anne had become the face of protection. Elizabeth's necklace had become the line between them. And when that verdict came, it did not restore what had been lost. It defined what could never again be treated lightly. In the end, the sapphire necklace did not destroy the monarchy. It exposed it. It revealed who was guarding memory, who was seeking belonging, who was trapped between love and duty, and who understood that royal symbols carry consequences long after the person who wore them is gone. Anne reclaimed more than a jewel. Camilla lost more than access. Charles learned that silence can still make a decision. Anne carried the sapphire case back into secure keeping with solemn relief, not victory. The Princess Royal knew her mother's memory had been protected, but she also knew protection had come at a cost. Elizabeth's necklace would remain under Anne's custodianship, and would not be worn publicly until the family framework was formally accepted. A family framework, in simple words, meant written rules deciding who could approve, protect, and use royal treasures tied to the late queen. This mattered because the monarchy could no longer allow private grief, public rank, and personal ambition to collide without limits. Camilla accepted the verdict in silence. The Queen Consort's vault access was partially restored, but not over jewels personally tied to Elizabeth, without approval from the custodial committee. That committee simply meant a small trusted group chosen to approve the handling of sensitive royal items. Camilla understood the message clearly. She had not been erased, but she had been limited. She could fight again, but fighting would only make the exclusion louder, sharper, and more public. So she held her pain behind stillness, knowing that sometimes defeat inside the palace arrives without a raised voice. Charles signed the final framework with a heavy hand. The king had finally accepted what the sapphire necklace had forced him to see. Monarchy cannot survive if private symbols are treated as personal prizes. He loved Camilla, but he could not rewrite Elizabeth's meaning to heal every wound. William watched the decision settle into place, and the prince understood it as a warning for the future. Inheritance had to be guided by meaning, not entitlement. Power had to serve memory, not consume it. The final truth was simple and brutal. The necklace became the line between possession and stewardship. Anne's act proved that loyalty to Elizabeth still shaped the crown after her passing, while Camilla's silence proved that belonging could not be claimed through jewels alone. Charles had chosen restraint. William had seen the lesson, and Anne had carried her mother's legacy without apology. The vault closed again, but this time it closed with a verdict. Some royal treasures are not won by status. They are entrusted only to those willing to carry the weight behind them. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.